Good morning, you are really welcome. I'm pretty excited to introduce you to today's guest. Byrne is a professional rugby player playing for Europe's top club, Leinster. He has 169 caps playing for Leinster. He's also represented his country 22 times. He has won 1 Grand Slam. He's played in 1 World Cup and more European Cup matches than you can think. Of the 192 games that Ross has played professionally in his career, he has won 81% of them. So I'm hoping he can teach us a thing or two about winning. If our names isn't giving it away, he is also related to me in this very special edition. Although he's 6'4" and a lot bigger than me, he is in fact my little brother. So welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. I actually didn't know that 81% stat. Do
you like that one?
I'll be using that in the future, yeah.
That's 156 games out of 192, if you want the other way of looking at that.
I'll take that.
Can you remember, how many of those games can you remember?
Oh, God. Probably the vast majority, to be honest. Well, you'd probably remember, more games obviously stand out. Some games stand out more than others, but yeah, you'd be surprised how far your memory can go back on certain games.
I'd say in incredible detail as well.
Some in incredible detail, some a bit more vivid.
Okay, well, let's go back for a general replay because you have been on a really interesting path to leadership. But let's start with the early days. Tell me this, can you remember life without rugby?
No. I'd say whenever I could walk, probably. It was either in the garden or it was out kicking a ball, doing something, and as soon as I was old enough, it was down to Wanderers. I think I was probably a year or two too young to even be playing, but I was there for a little bit anyway. So I'd say I was slightly nudged by our dad in a positive way.
I think slightly is a slight exaggeration. I can remember you in the back garden in nappies. So I don't really remember a time without you being alive, without you playing rugby either. And actually, I think you were 3 the time you went to Wanderers with Dad and you were sent home.
Yeah, it was a vivid memory now, I have to say, to be fair. But yeah, I went back and then I played in Belleville and then in school the whole way up. So I've pretty much had this my whole life, yeah. So I can't really say I can remember life without it.
And if you were to describe yourself as a kid, apart from kicking a ball non-stop, how would you have described yourself?
Probably pretty determined and competitive, I would say. As I said, we were always playing sport, no matter what it was, and or in school as well. So yeah, there was always that competitive edge was always there from the beginning, I think. Whether it was out playing with different kids in the estate or it was in school or whatever it was always there. The competitive
gene.
Yeah.
I mean, you grew up in a system, so you went to St. Michael's College, which is one of the big rugby schools. And for those of you who don't follow rugby, it's a pretty big scene in Dublin in particular and different parts of Ireland. And Ross went to a school that would have been fairly full on in terms of rugby. You grew up in a system that was completely focused on sport and success. I'd say almost a culture that was quite rugby obsessed. And you were playing at a level that was like semi-professional from, I don't know what you can tell us. And it's a system now, I guess, that other clubs outside of Leinster and actually countries even are studying because it's been so successful. What was that like?
It was probably just normal for me and for everyone my age. But I mean, looking now, you're looking at like 14, 15-year-olds or 16, 17, and they're even way more professional than we were, if we want to use that term. And you're kind of looking back on, Jesus, it's a bit ridiculous. But at the time, it's everything. But even if you don't go on to play professional sport, I think it's unbelievable preparation for life. And even the actual competition itself, I mean, it's over 100 years old. It's straight knockout. So you can train for 6-7 months and it's the be all end all. And if you lose your first game, you're gone. That's it. And it's as if life is over. But unfortunately, that's the harsh reality of sport and life, particularly professional sport. So in terms of preparation, it's probably the best thing I did in terms of preparing me for professional rugby.
Did you always want to be a professional rugby player?
I think so. There was definitely times when I wanted to be a professional footballer, but
the returns weren't there.
Yeah, should have maybe tried that a bit harder. But no, I was always obsessed with it. From a young age, there was obviously if it was the Super Rugby on in the Southern Hemisphere, if that was on at 7 a.m, I'd be up watching that before I'd be going to play rugby in the morning, or if there was ever a game on in any big game, I always kind of had to watch it and would be pretty obsessed with it from a young age, and probably still am. Well, I am still pretty obsessed with it now. So yeah, that was always there from a very, very young age.
And like a lot of you made it as well. Like that's another phenomenon. Like how many of your classmates from school went professional? I think
it's, I'm going to get this wrong, five or six. I suppose there was a team, like when I was in my second last year of school, and I think 7 or 8 of us actually turned professional, or were professional at one point. But in my, I suppose, direct year, there was 5 of us, and even we were all in Leinster at one point together as well, which we went through the age grades together, which definitely made it easier for us as well. In terms of some lads would, all their friends be off on holidays and they'd have to be here training, and or if it's nights out or different things, whereas for us, we were always together, we always had each other. So like, and probably even if one of us was doing it, the other person said, oh, I can do that. Even if they were struggling a little bit, like even subconsciously, I'd say that was there, which I'd say was a big help to all of us.
How much do you think that played a part in the fact that you actually made it? Because I actually think maybe some of the time the biggest achievement of being a professional athlete is that you made it in the first place into the professional arena.
Yeah, it probably also made it, it probably played it down a little bit less, which probably was helped us in the long run, I think, as well, in terms of like, it probably didn't seem like a massive deal because we were all doing it together. And even though we didn't all play for the senior team at the same stages, you know what I mean, we all had our caps at different, or our first appearances at different stages, some a lot, like I go a bit before others, but like in terms of just because we were all doing it together, it was kind of, okay, the first person's done it, the next person's going to do it. So it probably felt a little bit, wasn't overwhelming. Plus, I don't know, maybe it felt normal.
Which is like anything but, right? It's just surreal. When you look back on it, it must feel a little surreal even to you.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's when, I don't think it's happened, it hasn't happened since I've been in Leinster anyway. And I mean, I'd say it'd be very rare if it happens again. And the fact that we're all pretty much best mates. I mean, all the lads are my groomsmen at my wedding, so.
Next week.
Yeah.
So tell me this then, what was your first proper taste of leadership?
Proper taste was probably, so under 15s, which is the Junior Cup, which is, again, another kind of enormous deal when you're in school. That was the first time I'd ever been like a captain, let's say. That's probably the first time I'd felt sort of leadership responsibilities. And I mean, I didn't have a clue what I was doing really looking back now. But that was probably just a bit of a taste of it really. And then just as I kind of went up through the age grades, I suppose playing out half, you're kind of, even if you're not the captain, you're sort of the leader of the team in some areas of the game, or a lot of areas. So that was always probably something that kind of came naturally to me. So I've just kind of tried to progress that, but I've been exposed to a lot of good leaders as well, which has probably been a huge helping hand in seeing different styles. So it's probably just constantly evolved, and even now I'm constantly trying to evolve and develop.
Who's the best leader?
Oh, there's been so many different ones. I'd say Easton Say was probably one of the best ones, purely because he didn't speak a lot, but he spoke. Every time he spoke, it was, everybody listened, and he never neglected his own standards or performance. It was always, he would deliver on what he would say, and he'd always make sure he had his, let's say, everything was in order with him first. I think that was, he never felt, I think he had to do too much. So he was, I think, very unique. But there's been other leaders as well who've been probably the opposite in terms of unbelievably outspoken all the time, and they were unbelievable as well. So I think it's just different styles, but trying to find what the right style is for you, because I think everybody is different. I think I've probably done in the past where I've tried to speak too much at certain times, or maybe tried to speak less because I feel like I'm speaking too much, but it's just trying to find what the right balance is.
And what have you found about yourself as a leader? Like, what makes you good at it?
I think for me, I definitely speak quite a lot, but something I've definitely developed is trusting other people to speak as well, and get other people's opinion, or trying to get the best out of other people, I think is probably a big thing I've tried to learn. But even now, I'm still trying to, I think, evolve and find out exactly what the best style is. But I think one thing I have done is just been myself. And sometimes I think you have to just trust yourself as well, I think is a big thing. I think a lot of the time when you're in a leadership role, you second guess yourself. Is this the right thing to do? But I think you just have to trust yourself. If you don't trust yourself, why should anybody else trust you? So that's probably a big thing I've learned. So, and sometimes you have to say things or make decisions that aren't easy, and you might think this is going to come back to bite you, or people are going to have an opinion of it, but you just have to, I think, back yourself that ultimately you are making the right decision, and it's for the better of everyone else.
I mean, that bit about the self and the team, like, it sounds easy to say, but it's probably not that easy to do. Like you're saying about Isa kind of leading from the front and role modelling. How much of that have you done? Like, have you typically, in your head, put the team first or yourself first?
Probably the team. That's probably even how I would play the game naturally, in terms of that would be almost how I would see my role, and it's probably something I've probably done too much as well. But that's probably just naturally how I've kind of grown up and done it. And I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, because some of the best leaders are the opposite. And it's they look after themselves first and everyone follows them. So I don't really think there's a right or a wrong. I think it's just trying to find what's the best thing for you and what serves the team best. So if you putting the team first, that puts the team in a better position, go for that. Whereas if putting yourself first puts the team in a better position, go for that. So I don't really think there's a right or a wrong.
I guess, so you said you're an out half, which puts you in one of those leadership positions on the field. I guess, though, what happens off the field is also important. Like, what does leadership mean in sport off the field? Is everyone expected to lead?
No, I don't think everybody is expected to lead, but it's very different. I suppose in a sporting environment, we have some people who are unbelievably comfortable at speaking during the week. So off the field, in terms of meetings, they'll drive a lot of different things, the standards, the habits. And then we have some people who will be very quiet during the week, but when it comes to actually performing, they'll lead by their actions. So I suppose it happens in all sorts of different ways. And a sporting environment, I suppose, shows that some people are unbelievably quiet, but when it gets to the game, they're leading physically. So it's important, I think, that you have people who have everything, because if you have a team of everybody who speaks off the field and is great, all the meetings, but when it comes to the game, they don't actually deliver with physical actions, that's not what you want. And then vice versa, that's also not what you want. So I think it's just trying to find a balance so that the team is kind of covering all areas.
One of the things I always find is interesting as a team when I see you guys on the pitch is I often see you yelling at each other. There seems to be a lot of roaring across the pitch. And then there's also a lot of arms around the shoulders and a lot of hugging on the pitch. So you seem to have this kind of balance between extreme trust, or like real trust in each other, but also accountability. Yeah. I often find that interesting. Like, is there a line in terms of giving each other feedback or calling each other, that honesty that you need to build trust with blame? Like, is there a line? How do you get to that point?
There probably is a line, and it's probably been crossed a few times. It's probably more in training where the line gets crossed, to be honest, in terms of holding people accountable. But I think at the end of the day, like, everyone in the team wants the same thing. So I don't think people aren't doing it out of a personal attack. That's not the way I would look at it anyway. We're all trying to achieve the same goal. So it's trying to get the best out of each other. And sometimes I think everyone takes feedback differently as well. So if you're going in on a person hard who doesn't take that very well, it's probably trying to learn that, okay, that's not the best feedback for them, particularly in a game, because if it's in a game, they might have that in their mind that might affect them for the next 5-10 minutes. So it's probably trying to find out with each individual how they best learn or take feedback on board. But then I suppose there's sometimes when you have to just cross the line, and because you feel it's the only way you're going to get the message across. So, but as I said, no one, I think, takes it personally, because we all want the same thing at the end of the day. And I think if everyone can understand that, then I think if someone does cross the line, you can get over it pretty quickly.
Because it's in service of something bigger.
Exactly, yeah. There's no point, I suppose, as well, in terms of thinking, oh, I wish I had said that. and you go on and you don't have success or you don't achieve what you wanted. So I think at least if you've said what you're going to say, you don't achieve it, but you've kind of left no stone unturned a little bit.
All right. I like that. Like you don't leave anything on the table.
Yeah, because there's no point in, oh, if only I had said this, or if only I had told him to do this or that. At least if you've gone the other way, you'll know.
You have a clear conscience at the very least. I mean, feedback is something at Google we talk a lot about and we work really hard on. And I think I'd share your thinking on it, and it's super important. But I think it can be hard sometimes too. I think if the feedback is constantly coming at you, I think that there's again, going back to that line between kind of confidence and whatever's on the other side of confidence. How much feedback do you get in a week? Like how? Yeah,
I mean, I don't think anybody likes negative feedback. Like I think, well, I've never met anyone who does, who's sitting, particularly for us, because ours could be in front, I mean, I don't know what it's like for you, but ours could be a room of 40 or 50 people. It's up on the screen and it's one person getting called out for a particular action or something. And I mean, I don't know anyone who's going to enjoy that, but there's definitely a time and a place for it. And I think it's for the better. I think probably when you're younger, I found anyway, you'd be going, oh God, this moment's going to come up here. I'm definitely, and I think you almost feel, I don't know, is it almost a bit of an embarrassment? You're going, oh no, I shouldn't have done that or done that. But everyone has probably made that mistake at the end of the day. And I think it's probably trying to understand that these things happen. Like, you know what I mean? That's life, that's sport. So you just have to take it on the chin and then try and be better the next time. Because I don't think, in our environment anyway, it's not a case of people are doing stuff on purpose to get it wrong. But it's trying to learn from the mistake, particularly if one person makes a mistake, it's so everyone else can learn. I think that's for us why it's said in front of everybody. So I think, although it's not nice at the time, again, you're probably being self-serving for the rest of the group. Okay, thinking about, I'm not going to ask you to tell me about a massive mistake, but like if you think about, I'm sure there have been, we've all made mistakes. If you think about the big ones, like, has it taken you time and experience to get better at handling those? Like, how do you get over big mistakes now? In game, I'm very good at getting over them now, I would think, but I had to work very hard on that. Whereas previously it would have been, if I'd made a mistake, I probably couldn't let it go for 5 minutes or so. Whereas now I've had to work very hard on that. But I mean, after the game, I'd still, there's mistakes that I've done in games over the past few years that will still eat away at me, and maybe they will forever, I don't know. But it's just trying to, I suppose for me, it's say if I've made a mistake, you're kind of hoping you get that opportunity again down the line. So at least you can almost, to yourself, you can prove yourself right, saying, no, I can do it. That's the way I look at it. Now, I don't know if anyone else thinks that way, but that would be just trying to prove it to yourself more than anyone. And probably in a team, you're trying to prove to the team as well that you can get this right. Or it's not redemption, because you can't really change what's happened. But I think it's just to yourself and to your team that, no, you can do it. It's nice. And if you think, you mentioned being on the pitch, because you obviously have to make like insanely fast decisions on the field. But in your role, you're also taking these high pressure kicks. And I can remember countless moments of you doing incredible things under pressure. I remember you taking a kick against Ulster in the Aviva Stadium on a cramped leg. There was the big one. Probably a bit over dramatic, to be fair. Was it not a no. It's for the camera. There was the Australian match, big moment. You weren't even supposed to be there that day. And we might come back to that on the subject of readiness, because you've also mentioned that a bit. But how in God's name do you go from a game 1,000 miles an hour, being physically thrown at and thrown yourself at other people? You're under amazing physical pressure. Then the whistle blows and you have to step up and clear your mind under the highest of stakes. Like, what is the process? You said you've gotten better at letting, obviously this isn't necessarily letting mistakes go, but it's presumably the same thing. Like, how do you let whatever's just happened go and like get into the zone in 30 seconds? Like, when that ticker starts and you step up to the kicking tee, I'm always like, how do you get your head together? It's probably a little bit of subconscious as well, to be honest. Like, a lot of it I wouldn't try to overthink, and it would come from preparation during the week. If I'm kind of happy with how the week has gone, it might not even be how I've actually kicked during the week, but in terms of the actual prep has gone, I'll be pretty confident going into the game. I think that's always probably a big thing. And there's definitely times in the game where it's been a long passage of play, there's a penalty or a try and you have to kick it and you're like, oh my God, I can barely stand here. That does happen quite a bit, but you just have to, as you say, clear your mind, just strip it back to like unbelievably basic stuff. And I've like a couple of little kind of cues and like, it's nothing complicated and it's just trying to stick to that sort of process. And I know probably everybody says that it's generic, but for me, there has never been like a mad full of formula. I always just find that the less I have to think about, the better, in terms of if it's just one or two things, just commit to that and then hopefully it goes over.
I'd love to hear a bit more about the process, because it feels like you train for an insane amount all week and then you play a match for an hour and a half, and like that ratio is crazy. But I often think of like there's a parallel too. So I've been working in Google 10 years and advertising before that, and I think people find it interesting, like Google breeds innovation on this insane scale, and people often ask about creativity and the innovation, where it comes from, and I think they're often surprised to hear that it comes from actually a huge amount of structure and, you know, insanely high standards and brilliant basics and consistency. And I guess there's a parallel on steroids in sports there, right? Do you think sometimes that flair or that moment, your ability to actually nail a kick or pull off a play or just even do these kind of flary bits on the day, does that come from structure? Can you trust the process a bit? Does that give you...
Yeah, I think it all comes from a structure or a process, in terms of like, even if it's individually for me, my week could be very structured and kind of what I have to tick off leading into a game. But even as a team, we'd be the same. You know what I mean? We'd have to this covered. And by the time you get to the game, it's almost like going into an exam, in terms of, say you have 10 chapters to cover, you're going to cover 9 of them, but there's always that one chapter that you can't cover, in terms of you're not sure what's going to come your way. If you have a structure and a process and you have covered that and you're confident in all of that, I think that's when you say the innovation comes in, because you know you have the rest of this sort of banked, you have that confidence level, and I think that allows you then to delve into that other sort of area of innovation.
And how much, like, I'm just curious, how much of the time would you spend on your basics?
It's everything really, like,
yeah.
Because for us, we would say, like, and it comes back to what you're saying about the structure and the process, like for us, if we can't get our foundation and our basics right, there's no point of even talking about the flair stuff.
Yeah.
Because without your foundations, you've nothing. You know what I mean? So for us, that would be an enormous thing, and we would constantly go back to it. Even now, like you have players who've been there for 10 plus years, but they're still constantly going back to the basics. And I think it's the most important thing, because if you don't have the basics, there's no point in running before you can walk.
Yeah, there's no foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair. I really wanted to talk to you about resilience. It feels like it's a buzzword, and I think as you're developing as a leader, you get it a lot. I think as a woman, I've got it a lot over the years, dressed up as presence, resilience. There's all sorts of spin-offs on the conversation on resilience. But like when I think about gutting moments, right, there's the big stuff. I've watched you and the rest of your team lose crushing finals on knife edges. Maybe it's a little too raw, so I won't get into that right now. But actually, I remember seeing you do that at a super young age. So you talked about being captain on your under-15s team. I can remember you being, were you 13? You were the youngest player on the junior cup team in school. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you're 13 years old. And I remember being in Donnybrook Stadium. And for anyone who wasn't, involved in, it's like when you think about American football, school football, that's what rugby in this country was like in school. So you were 13 years old, like in front of 4,000, 5,000 people in a cup final match. And you were 2 points down. There was less than a minute to go. And as the out half, you popped back and the pass was coming for a drop kick, a goal to win the cup. And the ball comes back to you, and we were all standing in the stands, and I don't think I breathed. And it was probably 3 seconds, felt like 90. But that ball came back and you took a strike at goal for the cup and you missed. And I always remember your little body like falling to your knees, and it was like crushing to watch. Do you remember that?
I do, yeah.
What did it, like, does it get any easier?
No, it probably gets harder.
How do you deal with that?
Oh, I don't know. I wish I had the answers. No, it's like, yeah, it's hard to describe how gut-wrenching the moments are, even over the last few years. Like, what we've endured has been painful, to say the least. But, like, obviously we've lost 3 European finals in a row with Leinster, but, like, we still have like our drive. It's not like next year or this season, we just give it up, you know what I mean? Like, we're probably the opposite in terms of you've basically two options. You can probably retire, just say this is enough. You can kind of just mosey into the season, we'll see what happens, or you can say, let's just get on with it. What's happened, let's learn from mistakes and let's try and win. Like, that's all you can do, really. So it's just kind of on to the next one, and that's all. That's the only way I would look at it, because you can feel sorry for yourself all you want, but ultimately what happens. So you just have to try and improve, get better, make sure you learn from mistakes as best as possible, and then try and win again.
And if you really break down that process of like getting over something and going again, like there's sort of two bits to it, isn't there? There's how do you make sure that demons don't eat you and go over the moments or the things in your head again, or those seconds that you want to do differently. And then there's where do you find the motivation from? Like,
the motivation isn't lacking anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like the motivation's
certainly not but I think it's important that you do accept what's happened. Okay. So there's no point like just kind of brushing it under the carpet. We'll just kind of pretend that didn't happen. Or, like, it is, I think, important that you do accept how much it has potentially, or like how much of a toll it has taken on you in terms of psychological damage or physical, whatever it is. I think it is important that you do actually accept what's happened, because if it's accepted, then at least you can try to find a way of dealing with it, and then you can move on. Whereas I think if you don't accept it, it's always going to be there lingering in the background.
You're just building on cracks.
Now, it's always going to be there a little bit because just of the sheer nature of it, but at least you've actually accepted it, and I think you can deal with it a lot better, and I think that allows you to move forward and try and be better.
What about like on a values level? Do you think values is a kind of BS term? Do you think values is important? Like, how do you think about values when you think about team?
I think if it's used in the right way.
Okay, tell me more.
So, like, I've been in loads of teams and we've had different values. I think it's important. It is important to have, but I think it's important that you keep referring back to it, because I think a lot of teams will start off great intentions of these are our values. Certain things happen and maybe they don't touch on them for like 6 months. But I think if they're used in the right way, I think they can be brilliant in terms of like they can almost be a little bit of your foundation, your basics. So if stuff is going wrong, you can potentially just refer back to them and going, okay, well, are we ticking this box? Are we ticking this box? And if you're not, maybe that's where you're going wrong, as opposed to some of what you think is the really big stuff or the more the flash stuff. So I think if they're using that way, I think they can be brilliant.
Can you think of an example of like, has there ever been something as an individual or as a team that you value that you go back to time and time again, or that has made a massive difference to you?
Well, I suppose for us, it's not different, but we would have our values, but we would kind of refer to them on a weekly basis in terms of certain elements of the game, or even on like certain meetings. There'll always be, even if it's on a slide, you'll always see the words or the values there. So even if they're not always being directly spoken about, at least it's still subconsciously you're seeing it. So it's still, you're still going into your mind. I think little things like that is important, but even if it's a team, I don't know if it's like work ethic is a value, but if you're constantly talking about like, say like the skill element and, oh, we're not getting this right, why is this going wrong? But are you working as hard as you were previously? And maybe you might go, well, maybe we're not. So there's no point trying to get the skill element right until you're actually working to a standard that you've already said you're going to hold yourself to. So that's probably an example I would use in terms of maybe where teams go wrong.
Yeah.
I think it's important not to forget, as you said earlier, your basics, your foundation.
Yeah. What have you learned about yourself in the way that you lead? Like, what does it tell you about your values? Like, what do you value personally?
I think like a big thing for me would be like, obviously, as I said earlier, in terms of competitiveness, like, and determination, like that would always be my end goal in terms of doing everything we can to achieve our end goal. So that would always be something that I would try and drive like within myself, and then try and drive others to do the same. That would be a big thing, but also I think trying to do what's best for the team, in terms of, it could be like tactical stuff or on the pitch or whatever it is, but that would be a big thing I would try and drive as well. But I think a big thing I've learned about myself as well is also making sure that I don't neglect my own performance.
Okay.
Because there's no point in driving all these other things, but then you actually forget about yourself, because ultimately, if you're not performing, you're not actually helping the team. So
being too generous?
I don't think it's being too generous. It's probably just, you almost get sidetracked or distracted, and sometimes it's probably just putting the blinkers on one area, whereas I think it's important that you are making sure you touch on, if you have 2 or 3 things you look after. So I think that's probably a big thing. It's making sure you actually give yourself enough probably time to, I suppose, make sure your performance is at the right area while also trying to look at other things. And that's probably what leadership is a little bit, like when I think about it, in terms of, some people don't like leading at all. They just want to look after their own stuff, which is perfect. So they just know, I look after this, and my own performance, that's all I need to do. Whereas I think what makes great leaders is they can look after their own stuff in the exact same way that person can do, but they can also, okay, what's going on over here? Is that right? What's going on over here? Is that right? Okay, no, we need to fix this. So I think it's trying to do that as best you can.
It's a big piece of taking responsibility for other people, proactive responsibility as well.
I think so, yeah. I think so. For some people it comes naturally. Like, I think if you were to tell people, some people only look after this, they'd be like, I can't, you know what I mean?
I need to deal with that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so I think that's what some people are just naturally better at, or not better, they're just more comfortable doing it.
What is competitiveness? Right, like, so is it like winning against just winning for winning's sake, or does the opponent come into it?
Well, it's definitely, winning. I mean, sorry, there's definitely games you're playing against people, and there's that maybe slightly more edge to win, but like, it is.
Like you versus La Rochelle, this season just gone by, I'd never seen you like a bat out of hell.
Well, like, I suppose that'll probably come from, I suppose, the 2 previous finals, and it's just human nature, that is, I think, you know what I mean? But I think it's like, for me, it's the winning. Like, I wouldn't get too massively bogged down on the direct opponent. I know a lot of people do, and it's kind of whatever works for you, I think. It's
kind of interesting, isn't it? Like, some people seem to like channel an emotion. Yeah. And if you speak to people who get paid vast amounts of money to go into change rooms and fire people up, like, I've heard, hate can get a team going faster than opportunity. Like, there's all sorts of different opinions on it. But it's interesting, if you take it into a business context, we're in a competitive environment, we're competing, and kind of in a way that we used to have to quite as much, if we're honest. And so I think, even in a business context, how much time do you actually spend studying the competition, or do you just focus on yourself? Like, I think, do you just stick to your own game? Do you do your own thing? Or do you have to be tactical and really think about the opponent?
Well, we'd spend a lot of time on opponents. Like, we'd obviously look for opportunities, and we'd see their strengths as well. So we know there's certain areas where they can potentially cause us an issue, so we'd have to make sure we're kind of all across that sort of detail. But it all falls into the structure and the process of the week, so it's not like this week we're looking at this team. So we would do it every week, but we'd also be looking at ourselves as well. So it's a bit of a balance, because I think like even for if you weren't to look at what any of the other competitors were doing, and like 2 or 3 months pass and all of a sudden they pull something out and you're kind of going, oh my God, what is that? Whereas I think if you're constantly looking at yourself, constantly trying to evolve, but also constantly, for us, analysing the other teams as well, you probably start to see certain trends of where they might try to exploit you or what's working for you against other teams. So I think ultimately it makes you better as a group.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. If you're looking at yourself through their eyes, you suddenly start to find weaknesses that you probably wouldn't otherwise.
That's the thing, yeah.
Find.
Yeah, I think otherwise you can potentially brush over things a little bit.
It's a lot of analysis, isn't there?
There is a lot of analysis, yeah. Yeah. It's a very complicated game, I suppose.
And a lot of honesty.
There can be, yeah.
So I remember getting a text from you a few years ago, and I was on maternity leave at the time, so I actually had buckets of time in my hands, and you asked me to go and see a house. I know you've just bought a beautiful house some years later. It's probably taken you 3 years to do it up.
It's nearly finished.
But I remember you saying, would you come and have a look at this house? And I remember saying to Greg at the time, Ross just texted me and asked me if he wants to go and look at a house with him. And I was shocked, not just because you were 26 and maybe thinking about moving out of home, but I'm joking. No, it was the first time you'd ever asked me for like any kind of help in your life. Do you find it easy to ask for help?
No. That's a terrible trait to have. I don't know why. I've always probably struggled a little bit with it. It's probably the downside of being competitive, I don't know, or determined. I'm not really sure. I've just probably always struggled a little bit.
Do you think it's true of high performers in general, or is it?
I don't know. Maybe it is a little bit like, I think some people are really good at it. And then some of us just are really bad at it. And I can't really put my finger on it. For some people, I think it's definitely is it a self-conscious thing of, no, some people it's maybe a determination, I can do it myself. It's hard to, and I think for me, it's a little bit of everything. It's hard to, I don't really know, but it's definitely something I've gotten better at. And I think it's very important that you do. I think particularly for us, even in sport, because if you're asking maybe a question about something, or if you've been struggling with something, there's a good chance that that person has probably gone through it, or they know someone who has, or it's just it's hard to figure things out on your own, I think, the whole time.
It's definitely something we talk about an awful lot more now. I think in general, as a society, I think well-being is sort of fast rising the ranks.
Yeah.
But is it something that you like? Do you get coaching yourself outside of your mainstay coaching?
No, like,
do you have mentors?
We've kind of had like there's been sort of different mentors over the years, but it is a big thing that's probably improved, I would say, even in the last couple of years, probably even maybe a little bit less that I've noticed, even among the lads, in terms of like probably speak about different areas of the game, not tactical stuff, but like maybe sometimes a bit more like on the mental side of things a little bit more, which probably I never experienced when I first went in. It just probably wasn't something that was touched on. It was just kind of do this, do that, and get on with it. Like, and I think that's just probably society as well. It's probably developed a little bit as well in that area, but I think it's across all sport, and even businesses now are getting kind of people in to speak about that sort of area. But I think it's so important that you do kind of cover that space if you can.
Is he asking for a little bit more help maybe these days?
Yeah. No, definitely.
Still working on it.
Definitely more, yeah.
Okay. You mentioned kind of living week to week, which should be fairly well understood, but you're also kind of living with the selection process on a weekly basis, which feels, I'm not sure I'd be able for it, to be honest.
I don't know if any of us are able for it, to be honest.
You're up for a meeting, you're not up for the meeting. I don't know how you do that. But on a serious note, like, how do you deal with the kind of loss of control in a sense, I guess? And I might be projecting here and I might be blowing it out of proportion, but I feel like when you're constantly showing up to be selected, you must feel like somebody else is in control of my opportunity or my destiny to an extent. Like, is that hard to take? Is it true?
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, I suppose they're in control to a certain degree, but I suppose you're in control when you're given the opportunity to play, and then you could argue that you're taking it out of their control with your performance. But there is the other argument that if you're not getting selected, then it's completely, because you're not given a chance, let's say, or a proper opportunity, then maybe it's not out of your control. But I think you can spend so much energy on, in my opinion, wasting energy on like thinking about, are they going to pick me for this, that, and that. And I've done that in the past, and like, you can be exhausted after the day thinking about it. So I think it's just trying to control what you can. Like, and I know that's, again, another generic sporting answer, but I think well, I haven't found a better way of doing it. So if someone else has a better way, that'd be great.
But you have to, like, can we go back to that Australian game for a second? Because you weren't even supposed to be, Ireland was playing Australia in the autumn internationals, and you weren't even supposed to be on the squad.
No, I was just in Leinster, and we were actually playing Chile maybe or something. It was there was no league game or anything, and it was on like the Tuesday. So I trained with Leinster the Monday, Tuesday, and then Tuesday afternoon I got a call to come into camp just as cover, not to play, just because whoever was the third 10 was injured or something anyway. So I just gone in just as cover for the week, like not expecting to play. And then the same on the day of the game, like I was just in the team hotel, would do the warm up, but then Johnny Sexton got a niggle in the warm up, so he pulled out and I got my chance. But I suppose when I went in, I kind of just said, even though I was like, this is, because it's never happened to me before where I've been called, like called in. It does happen every now and then, but it's not that common. So I was like, I'm just gonna prepare as if I'm playing, just in case. I was like, I might not get another opportunity. So, and even the day of the game, I was almost like, I was like, just do it. Just prepare as if you're playing. And if I didn't do that, I don't know, would I have got that kick? Well, we'll never know. But I like to think I wouldn't have if I didn't.
No, it was a pretty pivotal moment. So I think that readiness, like being ready, and it's really interesting because at Harvard Business Review did this big study. They studied like 2,000 high performers or something like that. I might be exaggerating, but they studied a lot of high performers. And they boiled down like this trait was readiness. They're like the difference between outstanding people obviously they were looking at people in business, but they're always ready. Yeah. Like they're preparing for the next opportunity. They're always looking up and around. They're always aware of what's going on beyond their scope. You know, they're ready. So when the opportunity comes, it's not an accident. I think that's I took a lot from that.
I think that's the big thing. Yeah, I'd see it with a lot of players as well that I've played with, like in terms of they do all the prep during the week, and you can just see when it comes to the game, like they're not really fazed by anything. Like they've done their prep. They're so confident in that. There's always going to be different things that you obviously can't prepare for, but they're so confident in the bank of work that they've done that they're ready for whatever is thrown at them. And I think even in terms of if you want to evolve, I think that's probably a big thing. Like if you're constantly in that, not constantly in that stage, but when it comes to the actual match stage, if you're ready, that allows you then to maybe a bit more of that sort of innovation.
I think I'm going to leave it there. I've got one more question for you. Looking back at your younger self, if you were to give yourself some career advice, what would you say to yourself?
Give myself some career advice. Well, probably the asking for help would probably be I don't even know, not always help, but probably just like being maybe like as inquisitive as possible as a younger age. See older players maybe. It's probably, I would have done it at times, but maybe do that a lot more would be a big thing. And even some of the preparation, I would say, is probably another massive one in terms of when I was younger. Like I wouldn't have been half as prepared as I am now going into a game or a week. So I think that would be another massive one, yeah. Like, even though it probably seems, sometimes it can be maybe a bit boring when you're younger, but I think that would be a huge one, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.